Good morning, this is Garrett. Today I'd like to talk about Roseanne Barr's show being canceled after a supposedly racist tweet. She reportedly tweeted out about Vallerie Jarrett, saying that she was a cross between the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes. Obviously, this has been termed racist because of the Planet of the Apes reference. I guess that's really offensive. That's been something that people that were trying to be ugly towards blacks in America have used comparisons with gorillas, monkeys, and such to dehumanize them. And so Roseanne apparently fell prey to that. I think it was a tweet in poor taste, and she should not have said that. I guess I don't personally find Roseanne Barr all that funny, and I haven't really. I mean, I heard that her show was rebooted, and it was going to have a lot of conservative viewpoints. That she's very solidly, outspokenly pro Donald Trump, but I haven't had any interest in watching it. I didn't really like her show the last time around. I always thought she was pretty obnoxious, loud. I just don't particularly care for the dynamic of Roseanne Barr. But on the other hand, here ABC, they've canceled two shows that were being famously billed for being conservative, and this time around, it seems to me like they've seized on her tweet as an excuse, as a way of hitting the reset button. And I think they wish, in hindsight, that they had had something with Tim Allen that he had done or said that was really offensive that they could have pointed to like this as an excuse for terminating his show. And with Roseanne Barr, it was kind of a mystery why they picked her up after canceling Last Man Standing, considering that she was going to make the show political in a similar vein. She was, kind of the one Tim Allen seemed to be passing the baton to. Not that he passed the baton to her, but that she was picking it up, carrying that torch forward. But not a big surprise if ABC cracked down on her and her show right fast. I don't think it was in good taste what she said, but on the other hand, I have some questions about ABC. And let's talk about the View and Joy Behar, for instance. That's the thing that comes to my mind immediately. Joy Behar, a number of months back, made some remarks about Vice President Pence being, that is, it was one thing when you talk to Jesus and that's okay, but if you believe that Jesus talks back to you, then that's what we call mental illness. And this was hugely offensive. She made it like it was a joke, not like a joke, funny haha, but like a what political rhetoric has become, which is extremely insulting at the very core of people's beings. Probably nothing new historically speaking, but still ugly. It's not funny haha. It's trying to tear people apart pretty obviously. So Joy Behar makes these remarks and apparently doesn't care and doesn't expect that a lot of Christians are going to be offended that she is on daytime TV, this big audience that The View has. She's going to be making a joke about Christians being mentally ill if they think that God speaks to them through the Holy Spirit, through the Scriptures. And that's not weird fringe Christianity to believe that God speaks to us through His Word and His Spirit. That is historic Orthodox Christianity. Most Christians actually believe that. Hate to break it to you there, Joy Behar. And so there was a lot of upset. There were a lot of people that were offended. A lot of Christians that were offended by what Joy Behar said. And eventually she apologized. And near as I can tell, she's still on The View, and The View is still on the air. And I believe ABC is the company for The View as well. Am I right? Yeah, what do you know? American Broadcasting Company. This is season 21. Google, funny enough, IMDB gives them 2.9 out of 10. TV.com gives them 4 out of 10. Google users, 47% liked this show. So a lot don't like it. But they somehow still have a show. Go figure. But here's the funny thing. I don't quite understand. Why is it that Joy Behar, she made these offensive remarks towards Christians, saying that they were mentally ill, to believe that God speaks to them, making fun of the Vice President of the United States of America as if he is mentally ill. Just one in a long, long line, an endless array of attempts to delegitimize this presidency, this administration, from liberals, from the media. Not surprising one bit, but still offensive to half the country, still offensive to, I think, most Christians, that she would say that. And yet she was given an opportunity to apologize for that. She's still on the air. Roseanne Barr makes an inappropriate remark or a question, one that's of questionable taste, and boom, you're out of there. You're fired. We know why, because there's a double standard of who is fair game and who is not fair game. Mike Pence, authority figure, straight white male, Christian, totally fair game. You can ridicule, mock him at the core of his being all day long. And, even if we frown at that, we're just going to say, no, don't do that. But when Roseanne Barr makes a disparaging remark about, and as she's speaking as a woman again, and I would say in a similar, I would put Roseanne Barr in a similar category to Joy Behar as far as temperament, maybe. Kind of these mama bear types, probably around the same age. Roseanne Barr makes this remark about Vallerie Jarrett, who is a ethnic minority, non-white, we'll say it that way. She's a non-white woman, and served in a progressive Democrat administration. So, had a high position of authority within that administration, and also kind of makes a little bit of fun, putting Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes in the same category. Now what is it that's being said in that tweet that Roseanne Barr sent out that is any more offensive than what Joy Behar said about Mike Pence? The crucial difference being, in one case, you're attacking a group that has been considered fair game by the left, and in the other case, you're attacking their core values of feminism and identity politics and being Islamophilic. and so I have questions about that. I think there's a clear double standard. Not that I support what Roseanne Barr said, but that it is hypocritical the way that ABC is handling this. There's a clear difference. You know, it reminds me of when I was in first grade, and there was this teacher who was going through a messy divorce, and she was having a bad time with her husband and her son, who was, I think, a young adult. And so she was just angry at all mankind, and it was a mixed grade class. It was first and second grade that she was teaching at this little Christian school in western Montana. And because she was angry with males, you might have one of the young girls in the class misunderstand something or not do something quite correctly, and they would get a very gentle response. And then one of the young boys, like myself, miss something, not understand it. This gal even, she mocked my erasing skills, made me sit inside and miss recess for something that was extremely trivial. It might have even been erasing skills, that I wasn't erasing properly, so she was going to make me stay in and erase just for practice. And it was, but she would snap at the boys in the class. Had no patience for them whatsoever. It was almost like she was trying to redirect her anger towards her husband and her son. So my parents ended up, they were disturbed by this. They pulled me out about halfway through my first grade year, and I was homeschooled from then on out up until my senior year of high school, when I started taking some college courses in Ohio. But very similar double standard from ABC here towards their stars, and in the one case, and I mean, you think about, I want to look this up real quick. This is just, on the fly. I didn't plan to do this beforehand. Let's look up Last Man Standing. IMDB gives it a 7.5 out of 10. TV.com gives it a 7.7 out of 10. 95% of Google users liked this TV show. Let's compare that again with The View. The View, 2.9 on IMDb compared with 7.5 for Last Man Standing. 4 out of 10 for TV.com compared with 7.7 for Last Man Standing. 47% liked this TV show of Google users for The View, compared with 95% for Last Man Standing. And let's see here. Last Man Standing made it, how many seasons? 7? 6? 6. Looks like 6 seasons, according to Wikipedia, assuming that is up to date. 6 seasons compared with 21 seasons for The View. And both of them ABC, but one of them decidedly progressive, decidedly liberal. And they'll have, kind of like Fox News will typically have the token liberal on their shows, and they'll bring him on and talk over him for the most part. The View, they have conservatives on from time to time, but it's a dog pile. You have most of the panelists being liberals, and then the one conservative ends up getting just kind of dogpiled and sneered at. All the henpecking. So obvious. It's remarkable. Let's see. I'm curious. Roseanne's show. Roseanne. First episode date was October 18th, 1988. Final episode date May 22nd, 2018. So that was just last Tuesday, since the show has been canceled. And You've got a 7 out of 10 on IMDb. You've got an 8.8 out of 10 on TV.com. You've got an 85% like this TV show, according to Google users. And so again, much higher rating. People like this show much better. And yet, ABC's going to be quick on the trigger to cancel it, compared with The View, compared with Joy Behar. They don't yank her. I mean, they could have kept The View on and just and gotten rid of Joy Behar for that if they were so equal in their opportunity to be offended. But they're not. They're offended on behalf of the progressive agenda. They're offended on behalf of President Obama's administration and Vallerie Jarrett and Muslims and ethnic minorities, and they're grasping for an opportunity to get vindication for having canceled Last Man Standing. What Tim Allen said, I think, is on point when he was asked about why he thinks ABC canceled this show despite good ratings. He said, there's nothing more dangerous right now to the left than a likable conservative. And his character on Last Man Standing represented a likable conservative. Roseanne Barr, I never particularly liked her. Maybe she's, most people's cup of tea. It looks like she's got high ratings on a quick Google search from TV.com and IMDB and Google users. But I didn't particularly like her, and if she's been known to say things that were, of questionable good taste, I'm sure ABC would much rather have her being the face of conservatism, and then they can yank her off the stage and look justified as a way of making up for what they did with Tim Allen. I want to bring up another example too. Kathy Griffin, the comedian, holding up a severed head of President Trump as a joke. That was, and she apologized, and I don't know if she's got any career left in Hollywood, but I would be far less surprised if she makes a comeback than if Roseanne Barr does. I think Kathy Griffin holding up a severed head of Donald Trump as a joke makes her a hero to the left, because she is living the fantasy and had the courage to do what so many of them can only dream of and would love to do, which is behead the president. They'd love to give him the Marie Antoinette treatment, no doubt about it, in my mind. Let's turn this around, though. So the NFL kneeling protests, I think Ben Shapiro just tweeted out yesterday that isn't it kind of interesting to see conservatives, how many of them are consistent in objecting to ABC canceling Roseanne Barr's show due to freedom of speech concerns, versus the NFL cracking down now, apparently threatening fines against players who kneel during the national anthem. And and Ben Shapiro asks, basically, do we have a consistent view of freedom of speech as conservatives? Are we okay with the censorship of free speech, political speech, even offensive speech, when it comes from the left, but we're not okay with it when it comes from the right, or vice versa? If we're for freedom of speech that is offensive, it should not just be when it is our speech, what we want to say. It should also be when it's what other people want to say that we don't like. And that's a fair question. That's a good question to ask. I believe Stefan Molyneux also has a YouTube video. It was quite long, and I'm one to talk. But he was talking about the result of polls over decades now about what are Americans' feelings on freedom of speech. And are we really consistent? And are we okay with certain kinds of speech being censored? For instance, if a racist wanted to come into your neighborhood and deliver speeches in public about why some races are better than others, and so on and so forth, would we believe that that person had that speech was protected, or would we believe that that person should be censored? So also, a militarist comes into your neighborhood and is arguing for the military taking over the government, instituting a new form of government. How many Americans believe that person should be allowed to speak freely? How many people believe that that is speech that should be censored and suppressed? And so that's a video that's worth looking up. Go look up Stefan Molyneux and freedom of speech, and I think you'll find it pretty quick. But let's consider the question. NFL is a business. ABC is a business. Alphabet Soup is what they have in common, if nothing else. You've got Roseanne Barr's show being canceled. You have Joy Behar staying on The View, and The View staying on the air. You have Tim Allen being canceled, Last Man Standing being canceled. And the conservatives object to that because they see it as a double standard. And I totally believe it is a double standard on behalf of ABC. The NFL has been allowing your Colin Kaepernicks to protest the national anthem by kneeling, as a way of them saying that they believe that young black men are being murdered systematically in America by law enforcement, and that something needs to be done about. We need to raise awareness for that issue, and so they can't. They can't respect America and our national anthem and be patriotic because to them, America is racism against black people, against young black men. And so those protests, that lost the NFL a lot of viewers. The NFL, ESPN, sports commentary became incredibly political, to the point that it stopped being sports. It became the sports aspect of it became just completely consumed in this political divide in America. And so people, men who have watched football their entire lives, men to whom football is the closest thing to a religion, have stopped in many cases watching football on principle because they were just fed up with it. It became, rather than maybe an escape from reality, it became ruined by the encroachment of identity politics and so on and so forth. And so if the NFL, looking at their bottom line and seeing the loss in ticket sales, merchandising, in viewership and advertising revenue, all of that, in an act of desperation, they have said, hey, we're going to punish players that protest the national anthem. If they've said that, is that an infringement on freedom of speech in a similar way to ABC canceling Roseanne Barr's show or Last Man Standing, Tim Allen's show? Hey, can one of you guys let Otis out, please? Thank you. And I think that's a fair question. I do. I think it's a fair question, and I think, and me personally, I believe you would be at a loss if you tried to go back and find something in anything I've written or said where I have proposed that the NFL should fine or fire players that protest the national anthem. Again, as with Roseanne Barr, I think it's in questionable taste. I think they're mistaken. I don't think we should celebrate that. I don't think we should reward and applaud that as viewers. I don't think we should make heroes out of these young men who are trying to implies something about America being this racist murderer of young black men. Implies something about white America and law enforcement inherently being racist. I object to that, but I think we should. Again, I'm not for suppressing freedom of speech. I'm for us who disagree with that using our freedom of speech to disagree with it and to have a public debate about it. Not that I would be really keen on debating, some 300-pound linebacker if he feels really strongly about it. Maybe I'll debate with you through the internet. How about that? But if he's willing to, sit down and have a civil discussion, I'd much rather talk about it with him, and let's try and persuade one another. Let's discuss the facts and figures and percentages and ideas around this view that you have and this view that I have, to see which one of us is right. That way, I'd much rather that than this guy just be silenced, put out of a job, fired, terminated, what have you. Let him have his views and let him have a job. And if he's performing well on the field. Can you take that to the table, son? Thank you. Yeah, let's eat that at the table. Yeah. That's fine. You can eat it at that table too. That's okay. That's a principle is a principle is a principle. I think of some of the people that have appreciated and told me they appreciated what I've written about some major political lightning rods, like abortion, the LGBT agenda, terrorism, etc. And I write about those things and have very strongly worded opinions, and I get celebrated. But then if I turn my attention to a topic on which we disagree, if I turn my attention to, let's say, vaccines or public education or facial hair even, and if they disagree with my view, then all of a sudden they think that I'm a crank and that I shouldn't, maybe necessarily have anybody taking me seriously. And, that is deeply disturbing. It does not speak well to their integrity, I guess. Anybody that would react that way, the first sign of disagreement, you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you say that somebody's lost all credibility because they don't share your identical viewpoints. Well, you're being quite full of yourself, aren't you? If you think everybody has to have your identical views on everything, or else they're nuts, or else they're worthless, and don't give them the time of day. Get over yourself. Come on. So also with people that think, somebody, Roseanne Barr, she's just absolutely worthless. She tweets out something that's regrettable, questionable. So also with Joy Behar, for that matter. I think we should be able to listen and not just close our minds the moment we hear something that we dislike from somebody. I think you listen consistently over time, and you ask yourself, okay, am I objecting to what they're saying because I'm absolutely 100% certain that they are arguing against what's right and what's good? Is it just we disagree? There's some issues about which good men disagree, and that's okay. It has to be okay. The basis for freedom of speech is not this assumption that you're just going to agree about everything. If everybody was going to agree about everything, then there would be no such thing as freedom of speech. We wouldn't need for that to be written down someplace that we're going to protect people's right to free speech. Sorry. You just think about it for half a second. In self-government, limited government depends. It is absolutely essential that we have freedom of speech and be able to discuss ideas freely. And I am frankly disturbed by all of the above when it comes to Tim Allen, Roseanne Barr, not Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin crossed a line. Joy Behar, if she's still on the air and she gave an apology that seems sincere, okay, great. People say stupid things sometimes, and I don't think that should be a career ender for her. If her ratings are in the tank, and only like 10% of people think that The View is a good show, I question ABC's decision to keep them on the air for 21 seasons, but that's ABC's decision to make. Joy Behar, I don't think should be rattling a tin can on a street corner begging for alms just because she offended me and said something I think was in poor taste. So also with, I think, Roseanne Barr and Tim Allen, I don't have to like Roseanne Barr to think that, if she's got a good show and people like it, I think she should be able to stay on the air despite saying something that people were offended by. Quite frankly, I was offended. I found the protests of the national anthem to be racist in the majority of cases, because you listen to the rhetoric around those protests, and the rhetoric is all white privilege and this and that about white America and Americans just being racist. And the assumption being, if you get a white cop and he shoots a young black man, then the white cop is a racist by default. Guess what? Newsflash, that is racist. That is a racist assumption. You are prejudiced. That is the very definition of prejudice and racism, to assume that all white people are racist, and then to have a complete blindness to it when there's racism from black people and from brown people, from all non-white people. You don't even see racism. And let's talk about this too. Roseanne Barr, she tweets out that Vallerie Jarrett looks like a cross between the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes. And that is offensive. And I watched Black Panther, which has great reviews, really highly celebrated movie, latest Marvel Universe comic book superhero film that just came out. I liked it. I thought it was a cool movie. Not that I have to like every element, every single last piece of dialogue, and every, but on the whole, I thought it was a well-made movie. It was an interesting original concept, and I liked it. I thought it contributed. It added something to the Marvel Universe, which I enjoy watching the movies from, and so I liked it. But, nobody who's seen those movies could miss the racist remarks that are dropped in here, there, and everywhere, and in the racist attitude towards white people of some of the characters. And you could say, well, that's part of the struggle within the soul of the black community around the world or in America or what have you. So they're just representing that, and that's fine. But, I question whether if you had changed the skin color of the characters, changed the dialogue, and made black white and white black for that film, whether it would not have been made. It would not have been released. It wouldn't have hit theaters. And if it had hit theaters, there would be a public outrage like you have never seen, because it would have represented that the Disney franchise and Marvel and all the rest were deliberately, and after a great deal of thought and intentionality, putting this out as a product and saying that this was okay. Everybody and their brother would be saying that it was irreprehensible. You get one of these main characters in Black Panther. He's the chief of one of the 4 tribes, I think it is, of Wakanda. And, they have this one scene where the villain has taken over the kingship of Wakanda. He's dethroned T'Challa, the Black Panther. Sorry. He has deposed him, and for all anybody knows, he's killed the main hero, the Black Panther, thrown him off a waterfall. And so the hero's mother and sister and love interests and this white CIA agent who gets taken back to Wakanda for healing, because Wakanda has highly advanced medical technology thanks to vibranium. These escapees flee the royal palace, for this other tribe that's always lived kind of in the mountains and the hinterlands, who's defiant. They don't want to really, be bowing to and submitting the same way that everybody else does. They live in the mountains. They just kind of keep to themselves, and they're kind of left alone too. And their chief, this big, big black man. As soon as the CIA guy shows up, what is he doing? Why is he even here? How dare you bring him into here? Da 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 da. Because he's white, right? That's what it is. And as soon as he starts to speak, he just, this chief and all of his guards and his court start literally barking at him and barking over him, and until he is quiet, and it tells him, if you speak again while you're here, I'm going to kill you. This is never rebuked. This is never rectified. It's treated like it is the fulfillment of a fantasy, and as if it's a kind of cinematic reparations, like a small sprinkling of Django Unchained into the Marvel universe, to thrill and delight the black viewers and the social justice warriors. And there's no outrage. Nobody's getting fired over that I know of. Haven't seen that on the headlines of every news outlet's website. Haven't seen that all through my Facebook feed. I haven't seen that on Drudge Report, that anybody is all up in arms about that. Because there's a double standard. Because that's fair game, according to political correctness. But Roseanne Barr saying that Vallerie Jarrett is a cross between the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes, that is absolutely breaking the rules of political correctness. Well, let's ask a question too. What is political correctness? Where does it come from? Who wrote these rules? Who made them up? Where are they written? And where can we find them and read them so that we know not to violate them?
Dad, let's unplug it.
Okay, that's fine.
But it's on.
Oh, that's fine. I'll just put it on.
Since it's done charging.
Yep. Thank you. Voltaire once said, "If you want to know who rules over you, find out who it is you're not allowed to criticize." I think that is political correctness. It is this kind of Orwellian Ministry of Truth backwardsness, where the left has separated everybody up, all their potential voting blocks, into these compartments with identity politics, and then they have told each of these blocks different things, promised all of them different things, and promised seemingly all of them that the biggest threat to them is the straight white male who believes in Jesus and wears a suit, and he is your enemy. If you're a woman, he's your enemy. If you're Hispanic, he's your enemy. If you're black, he's your enemy. If you're gay, he's your enemy. If you're a non-Christian, he's your enemy. If you're a Muslim, he's, telling all of these small groups that he is your enemy, because the left wanted to bring about Marxism, and has been trying to bring about Marxism for 100 years. Slowly but surely. That's what progressivism is. In case you didn't know, it is the slow, gradual working towards Marxism, as opposed to the Bolshevik Revolution. Progressivism is evolution, and so anytime there's an opportunity to affirm and support and reinforce this narrative that straight white men, Christian men in America are the devil, the left seizes on it and loves it. And Roseanne Barr, she's not a straight white man, but she aligns herself with Donald Trump, and that's just as well. So she might as well be, she'll get thrown in that camp. Any minority who starts espousing political principles which oppose progressivism, any minority who breaks rank and objects to what the left is doing with identity politics, starts advocating some kind of conservatism, is immediately destroyed, or every attempt is made to destroy them. They're called a traitor because apparently they were just supposed to know their place and be good little boys and girls and do the bidding of cultural Marxism. And if they don't, then they're off the reservation, so to speak, no pun intended. If you want to know who rules over you, find out who it is you're not allowed to criticize. Well, Roseanne Barr is not allowed to criticize Vallerie Jarrett. Joy Behar, they were a little less quick to realize she wasn't allowed to criticize all Christians. What the left ran up against there, they thought if she was criticizing Mike Pence, then she was doing God's work as far as the fulfillment of this cultural Marxism, this progressive agenda. He is the epitome of the straight white male Christian with a suit as vice president. Clean cut, but they don't hate him any less for that. Probably hate him all the more, and would love to ridicule him out of town. Joy Behar, when she was attacking him to the core of his being, that was okay. When lots of Christians started to get offended, that's when all of a sudden they saw the light and realized, oh no, we should rethink that, because that's not okay. When your agenda is to try and manipulate and brainwash all of America into becoming progressive and leftist and embracing Marxism, you're defeating yourself if you start alienating people in the process. That's not, they're manipulating people, and if people start to get wise, get offended by what they're saying, that's the standard of right and wrong. Their standard of right and wrong is not universal. It's not, is it true? Is it right? Is it good? Their standard of right and wrong, of whether they're going to apologize or not, is, does it work? The ends justify the means. And Saul Alinsky, in his book Rules for Radicals, he says, that's the wrong question. Do the ends justify the means? Basically, don't even ask that. Are you stupid? Any ends are justified. Any means are justified depending on what it is you're trying to do, and can you actually pull it off? That's really the only question. If you lie, steal, cheat, destroy, it's all fair game, because your book is literally dedicated to Lucifer. And when you look at the policy positions and you look at what side they consistently line up on, the Democrats, the progressives, they're as happy as clams to affirm and support North Korea and Iran and Hamas and the Palestinians and grooming gangs and everybody else. They're as happy as clams to take up the cause of MS-13 and object to them being called animals, if that's what it takes to defeat the real threat of the straight white male who believes in Jesus. Because they've convinced themselves and they've brainwashed about half the country that is the single greatest threat to the world. And I'm right. One last little thing, and then I'm going to wrap this up and get off for today. Watched an interesting little snippet of Michelle Malkin on CRTV Facebook this morning, and it was about public schools giving kids values tests. And she tells the story of this mother who, her child comes home and is talking about this weird test they took, where they were asked some question. I don't remember what it was, but it just struck this mother as odd, and it wasn't any kind of question you would see on a test about the topics that schools are supposed to be teaching, reading, writing, arithmetic, social studies, etc. It was very distinctly a values question, and I think it might have been something to the effect that, if you suppose there is a midnight painting gang at your school, and they go out in the middle of the night when they're supposed to be sleeping, and they paint on the walls, if you're told not to go and join this gang and threatened with punishment, if you go and join this gang, are you going to go and join this gang? Your parents disapprove, and they're going to punish you if you go and do it. Are you going to join the gang and go out in the middle of the night and vandalize things with them, or not? And it's this weird question, and so the mom is, I don't remember if that was it. That was one of the questions on the test. But the mom was just kind of like, what kind of a test is it? So she tries to contact the school to ask them, and it basically gets obstructed. Like, the school doesn't want to show her the test, which is weird. Right there, just in and of itself. Why wouldn't you, as a parent, have a right to see that your kids are being asked questions by the school? In what universe would you not have a right to ask that, and would the school not have an obligation to make that known to you? But in some weird, twisted Twilight Zone world that this happened in, called American Public Education today, it took this mother 4 years to get a hold of a copy of the test, and she had to jump through all kinds of hoops in order to do it. And Michelle Malkin's little 3-minute 5-second video here, she's talking about this test being given to measure the values of children and their personality in respect to do they submit to authority? Will they submit to authority and follow rules that they don't like? If they're threatened with punishment, will they be compliant? Will they, and various different things like that. And at least the way Michelle Malkin and this gal, this mother that she was interviewing, the way that they characterized it, was that our children in America are being measured, and then the school system, the education system, is going to use the results of these tests to recalibrate our children from little on up, and to engineer them, to engineer their personalities, and so on and so forth. Can one of you guys please let him down? He wants through the gate. He is desperate. We have a little child gate at the bottom of the stairs here to keep the dog from going upstairs. For some reason, the dog likes to go upstairs and pee in my daughter's room. I don't know why, but of course we frown on that, so we put a gate there. It's not even really for the children. I don't care if the kids climb over the gate, go up, let each other through. But we don't care for the dog going up and peeing on the carpet. Doesn't really do it down here. Why does he do it upstairs? Somebody tell me. Anyway, so the public schools testing kids' personalities, their values, to figure out how to calibrate them, how to engineer society from an individual standpoint, and what buttons you need to push with kids in order to get them to behave. And I want to point out, decades ago, corporal punishment, spanking, a ruler on the hand for misbehavior. You watch, let's say, Anne of Green Gables, or some show that portrays schools, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And, a child speaks out of turn or misbehaves or shows up late or whatever. Teacher has a rod that then, you hold your hand out and whack, and that's got to sting. I am not necessarily even in favor of that returning. I have a small rabbit trail. I object to anyone but my wife and myself spanking our children. I am in favor of spanking. I think nothing corrects a bad idea sometimes except for a good spanking. Grounding doesn't always work. Stern talking to doesn't always work. But, good spanking does the trick sometimes, and it's the only thing for it sometimes. But, in public schools, they're not allowed, you can't bring prayer into the schools, you can't bring the Bible into the schools, you can't talk about intelligent design even, much less what the Bible teaches as far as our origins. It is a godless system by default in terms of the Christian God. It is an anti-Christian, unchristian moral vacuum as far as any of that goes. But evolution is taught, humanism is taught, secularism is taught by default. It is, that's what fills the vacuum. And you've got kids being told that they're animals, that they can just behave any old way, that they want, especially with regards to sex. Experiment if you feel like you're a boy, but you're actually a girl. We'll call you a boy, and we'll, maybe even in some cases, start you in the process of transitioning. Make sure, make sure that you're supported and affirmed in that. Psychologically, we're going to get you ready to go ahead and do that by telling your classmates that they have to affirm that, celebrate that, and maybe even give you an elevated social status. Say that you're really, really brave and you should win an ESPY award, and that you should be on the cover of Vanity Fair and be Woman of the Year, Bruce Jenner. But these schools, they've taken God out of the mix. It's a godless education by default, and parents can say, "Well, I teach my children about God at home, after school. I take them to church on Wednesday nights. Take them to youth group. I take them to Awanas. I take them to church on Sunday morning. I take them to Sunday school, etc., etc." But the rest of the week, your children are learning implicitly that it is okay, it is acceptable, apparently even preferable, that they live in an environment and behave in such a way that their Christian faith needs to kind of go underground. It not be the forefront, that they not be overly comfortable talking about it in light of the subjects that they're studying. It certainly should not. The Christian worldview should certainly not inform their values and their perspective on social studies, on history, on science. That is reprehensible, and you will be laughed out. You will be failed. You will be mocked. You will be jeered at. If you're a teacher, you will be fired and publicly ridiculed and embarrassed if you go there or try to go there. And so we've done that, and then lo and behold, the kids act as if there is no right and wrong. Who'd have thought? You tell them that they can fool around and have sex, and you encourage them to put condoms on bananas, and then you show them graphic sex ed. Tell them this is how you get it on, and why don't you go try it? Please experiment. That's healthy. Mazel tov. And then you tell them that it's okay to have an abortion. Some places it will even take you to get one, maybe. Give you information on all that, and and lo and behold, the schools have a hard time convincing the kids that there are any authorities over them, except through careful manipulation, and contriving of a system that totally dominates them without them even knowing it. And in the absence of corporal punishment and any objective universal standard, it falls to these elaborate ruses. You're going to give kids values tests and figure out how to manipulate them. And lo and behold, what you're going to get, and this is an unintended consequence for parents that they don't think about, apparently, or care about, but it is, I think, an intended consequence for the leftists who want a progressive future. They want an increasingly socialist future, a Marxist future for America. You're going to get adults raise a child, train up a child in the way that he should go. When he's older, he will not depart from it. That is to say, you train up a child in the way he should not go. When he's older, he will not depart from it. You train up a child to be compliant and to comply even with unjust, wicked rules, and to disengage their brain, to be a passive recipient all the time instead of an active agent in society for the good. You teach them that they can't share their faith openly, that it needs to go underground, and that it sure as hell should not inform public policy and the way that anything actually gets decided. You can keep it to yourself, but it needs to be private. You're going to get kids who are raised in that from kindergarten to 12th grade and then on through college in a more extreme fashion. And then once they reach adulthood, how do you think it is that they're going to live out their faith? They're going to live it out the exact same way that you allowed them to be conditioned to live it out or not live it out their whole childhood. You're going to teach them that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, when they're at work, they do things however the boss tells them to do it, even if it's wrong. And they keep their objections quiet and just say yes sir, yes ma'am, and then they'll reserve their Christian faith for Wednesday night at 6:30, Sunday morning at 9:30, a little bit of Bible reading maybe in the morning before they go. In the evening before they go to bed, a little bit of prayer for their meal, maybe as long as nobody's looking, because you don't want to get in trouble like that teacher did that one time that they said Jesus. You don't want to have example. Once you become an adult, maybe it was kind of okay. We mocked you, we made fun of you, we tried to beat it out of you, verbally, psychologically, as a child. But once you get to be an adult, boy, how you better let that stuff go, or the same stuff. You're going to lose your career. You're going to be mocked and ridiculed publicly, same way that Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so was. This is profoundly disturbing, and not totally unheard of. You think about Common Core. One of the things that I had read early on was that Common Core was being billed as this way of putting children on paths to future careers that would fit well with their temperament, with their personality, their et cetera, et cetera. And the way this was going to be done is you test every child's aptitude for various subjects, and then you place them in classes according to their aptitude and according to their interests, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, you've got teachers and administrators who are making the determination and saying, hey, we think little Johnny could be a doctor someday. We think little Susie can be a CEO someday. Little Billy, who came to school with a Make America Great Again shirt, we think he's probably going to be a janitor. You get a little boy is being sent home from school for eating their Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun, pointing it at somebody. In that kind of an environment, I don't trust for a moment school administrators and bureaucrats to interpret a test, an arbitrary test they've cooked up, and to decide where our children should be going, what their future career paths are going to be limited to, because they've placed them in certain fast tracks or not placed them in certain fast tracks, put them in a little box in a junk drawer if they saw something they objected to in their values. If they said, little Johnny looks like he's probably going to grow up to be a conservative, definitely don't want him in any kind of a class that's going to lead to him having a conservative influence on the future of this country, politically, socially, etc. We're going to put him in a sphere that keeps those ideas safely away from where they can affect any change. That's absolutely 100% what the consequence will be of such measures. and the left knows it, and they've known it for 100 years. And if you are somebody that went to public school, and your parents went to public school, and your kids are going to public school, and this just makes you really uncomfortable, and you don't want to do anything about that, you say, yeah, I can kind of see maybe sort of hypothetically what you're talking about, but I'm just going to click out of this because it makes me uncomfortable. I would challenge you to ask yourself whether your discomfort and your feeling of helplessness about it all isn't also a byproduct of the education you received in the public schools, which teaches conformity, which teaches you to respect this and revere this system, regard it the way that people in times past would have regarded their mother and their father. It was designed to shift loyalty and emotional investment in children away from their parents into the state. And if you go back far enough, you read the history of it, John Dewey and all of them, they adopted this Prussian model of education, which was known, which was highly regarded, widely regarded as being intent on creating a slave mindset. In 99 out of 100 children that passed through it, it was intentionally designed to engender conformity in the Prussian people, to the point that they would be good factory workers and good soldiers for Frederick the Great and the Prussian military-industrial complex. And John Dewey, he was a progressive of progressives, and he admired this system and wanted to institute it in America as a way of turning America increasingly progressive and realizing this dream of a progressive America. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we're getting more and more of. And you could say, it works two directions, this progressivism thing. When it's happening on the front end, you say, well, it's no big deal. Look, everything's fine. They're not doing anything too drastic. When you look in hindsight, you say, well, it wasn't so bad back then, but that's just it. I mean, it's like when you're climbing a mountain. You don't realize how much elevation you're gaining, except for your fatigue. You don't realize how much elevation you're gaining until you look down. And then you realize, oh my goodness, I was just down there an hour ago. I was just down there 3 hours ago. How did I get up here? And then you start to, oh my goodness, wow, okay. So it is with progressivism. It just keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up. But it's not a beautiful mountain overlooking this majestic lake. It is the mountain of doom. And you get to the top with this ring of power, and it tempts you to put it on and to use it for good, supposedly. That's what Dewey overcame the objections to implementing a progressive education, the Prussian model of public education in America. He overcame those objections by saying, well, yeah, the Prussians used it for evil, but we're going to use it for good, right? We're going to use it to make Americans, and so you get all these immigrants from all over the world who are coming to America, and there's a question, how do we assimilate them? How do we integrate these people who speak Italian and they speak all these different languages, these Irish, these Germans, these English, these, you name it, coming to America? How do we integrate them? And more importantly, how do we integrate their children into society? Well, we're going to take their children from little on up, compulsory education. We're going to force those parents to send us their children from kindergarten through 12th grade. We're going to educate them, even though for the first 100 years of America's history, children were educated at home and did just fine. Look up how the founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln and all the rest of those really, really great presidents we've had. Look up how they were educated, and you will be perhaps surprised to note they were educated at home, and they turned out just fine, and more than fine. They turned out self-starters with courage of their convictions, with a willingness and a readiness to do what was right, to stand fast. And you don't get that with a system that is designed to breed conformity. You don't. You don't. In fact, that is the whole point. Frederick the Great found it really inconvenient if he would tell, or his generals would tell some soldiers to go fight the enemy. Go take that hill. Well, why are we fighting them anyways? They're Christians, we're Christians. I object to, what's the basis, the moral basis, the moral justification for this war? What? How dare you even question that? Get out, go do it. You know what, the answer is going to be, I'm going to take your children and I'm going to teach them. I'm going to teach them to be obedient from little on up by sitting them in rows and columns in an orderly fashion, forcing them to conform to discipline, first and foremost. It's not about education. Education, in the classical sense, is you're learning how the universe works. You're learning how to think for yourself and how to have a good mind. Education, in the progressive sense, is you're learning how to conform. You're learning how to obey, to submit to the needs of the state, to become part of the collective. You're learning to become socialized, aka to become a little socialist in varying degrees, to the point that the best products of that end up running for the Democratic ticket, but even the most resistant ones, they go off and become, in many cases, your rhinos who run as Republicans, but they were head of the college Democrats at Liberty University when they attended there 9 years ago. I want to read one verse, and then I'm going to call this good, because I'm at 1 hour and 6 minutes. Seems like that's about where I'm landing here lately. I started a little bit earlier today, and so I'm not quite to 8 o'clock yet when I usually like to leave for work. But Romans 12:2 says, this is Paul writing to the church at Rome, Christians at Rome. He says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. We could look at the broader context of this verse. I would encourage you to, if you have any questions about how I'm going to use this here. But, in my mind, Romans 12:2 is a very, very strong argument against public education in America. It's an extremely strong argument, along with another verse from Matthew 18, where Jesus says, it would be better that a millstone be tied around someone's neck and they be thrown into the depths of the sea than they would cause one of these little ones that believes in him to sin. Jesus says that. Very strong language. Very strong language. And I think it applies in America to the public education system, and all too many of the teachers and administrators, people cooking that system up. If it applies to nobody in America, it applies to many of them who are pushing this godlessness down the throats of our children, force-feeding it to them from K through 12. Romans 12:2 as well. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. What does that mean? Do not be conformed to this world. Think about it. Do not be conformed to this world. It means you're not trying to be like everyone else. You're not trying. You don't feel this need to be like everyone else. And not only that, don't be. You should not be like everyone else. Just because the rest of your community and the rest of your family for generations has gone to the public schools, or they've done any number of other things, does not mean that is what you should do. That's not the standard. The standard is not what everyone else is doing. That doesn't become the standard of right and wrong. And Joy Behar can suddenly see the light when a whole bunch of Christians get offended by what she said about Mike Pence. She can see the light because she believes that right and wrong is determined by by counting heads, argumentum ad populum, the logical fallacy of taking a vote to determine what is true and what is good. Do not be conformed to this world, because that's the way that the world reasons. And that's how horrible, evil, no good, rotten things happen. That's how good things, right things, true things do not happen, is because each individual is looking at the collective for guidance, is looking to the collective and the group of people around them to tell them what to do and what not to do. And unless they get the green light, unless they get the red light, they're not going to go, they're not going to stop. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Well, how do you renew your mind? You know, your mind is just full of all this junk food, intellectually speaking, emotionally speaking. All this junk food of what the Joy Behars of the world are putting out there, that Christianity is this mental illness. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. God renews your mind. You get in the scriptures, you get in God's word, and he starts telling you what is true, what is reliable. And you can trust God. He would have zero reason to lie. Every man, and myself included, has all these reasons to twist the truth, to leave out certain details that are not flattering to us, to add or embellish details that encourage someone to go down the path or not go down the path that's most convenient to us. God has no reason to mislead us, to lie to us. In fact, he is truth. He not only is completely honest, he is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. What is the will of God? Is that important in the public education system? Is that important to our media, to our mass media? What is the will of God? That is the one question you are not allowed to ask. That right there is the most damning aspect of public education, is that you are not allowed to ask, what is the will of God? Tell me I'm wrong. What is good and acceptable and perfect? You have to have a standard in order to answer that question. What is the will of God? What is good and acceptable and perfect? That should be the goal of education, to figure that out. Case in point, I was just talking with my second-born son yesterday. He was trying to finish up his math. It's been like pulling teeth. He found it really, really boring. I think the reason why, too, and parents, if you've got a kid who's not engaged, they're not getting it, whether they're homeschooled or not, they don't like a certain subject, they hate it, ask yourself whether the way in which that subject is being presented to them fits them. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to teach any given subject: math, reading, arithmetic, social studies, etc. Some kids just have a mind that's naturally great at this, that, or the other subject, but every child's mind learns differently. There's some kids that they learn best by hands-on. There's some kids that learn really well visually, learn really well by hearing something spoken out loud, read out loud. There's all kinds of different learning styles, and then you get kids that are more left brain, right brain dominant, have different personalities, they have different interests, and you can take all of that as a parent. You have to take all of that you know about your child. You have to study your child and look for the cues that tell you where they're at. And then with a subject, if they hate math, my second-born son was just hating his math. It was like pulling teeth for my wife to get him to do it and finish it up for the summer. And so, I called him up yesterday. I was at work, and I had to explain, hey, this phone that you're talking on, this phone that I'm talking on, this pickup that I'm driving in to work, the job that I do every day, it runs on math. And in order to make these things in the modern world, in order for me to work, to make money, to figure out how much money I have versus how much we need to spend on groceries or the mortgage or, fill in the blank, I have to do math. And so in order to be productive, in order to be fruitful, and to do what I need to do, to be responsible for my family, take care of my family, as God has given me the responsibility to. I learned math. I use math on a daily basis, and so you need to be able to do math as well. This is no less true with any of the other subjects. There's a reason why our children need to learn those subjects and learn them well, and be able to apply those subjects to their daily life. No less with the sciences, physical sciences, with history, with reading. Reading may seem like it's just kind of as long as I can read the instructions. My boss emails me on filing these reports or what have you, I'm good. No. You need, in reading, you need to develop critical thinking skills and be able to examine ideas and understand the inherent meaning of what somebody intended, what somebody meant by what they said, and not just read into what it is subjectively and say, well, that's true for you, but this is what how I feel when I read this. No, what did the author intend? What did they mean? Learn how to study the grammar, the structure of a sentence, the word choice, understand the meanings of words, not just reading your feelings, reading books. All that's very, very, very important. And as Christians, it's imperative that we're reading the Bible with our children, that we're teaching them how to read the Bible, and not just read out of it whatever they want, not having a self-serving interpretation of every passage, which eliminates any responsibility for anything they don't want to have to do, which allows them to turn a blind eye to the unpleasant realities that don't reflect well on them, or whatever. It's imperative, and it's imperative for their spiritual health. It's imperative for their mental and emotional health. It's imperative for our national health. You get generations of kids who are taught, as John Dewey wanted them to be taught, to care more about their feelings, their subjective feelings, than about objective reality and principles and whatnot. And it's no wonder you get more and more Americans who are okay with just the Constitution, the Bill of Rights being interpreted any old way, and having history rewritten. They don't know history to begin with, so what difference does it make if somebody rewrites it and starts making up a bunch of stuff that's not true, or trivializing it? Even with current events, what does it matter if somebody's trivializing current events? We're just going to check out, rather than do the hard work intellectually and take responsibility to be informed and to be prepared to do something about what's happening. We're going to just check out. We're going to say, well, I'm not going to read the news because it makes me uncomfortable. Suck it up, Buttercup. Since when did your comfort become the most important thing in the world? Responsibility is the most important thing in the world. How about that? You're responsible to God. You're responsible to your fellow man. God, Jesus, when he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? Does he say to love yourself? Does he say, like Aziz Ansari on Parks and Recreation, treat yourself? Or does he say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind? The second command is like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. That speaks to responsibility. And we need to raise our children with that in mind. Are we preparing them to obey those two greatest commandments, to love the Lord their God with all of them, with all their mind? To have a mind. We emphasize sports to our peril if we say we're going to leave our children in an environment which is spiritually harmful, which is intellectually malnourishing, and we're going to leave them in that environment because sports. Why? I mean, why? You're going to love Lord your God with your body? Is that what the rationale is? You want your kids to be healthy by exercising? Last I checked, you can exercise. You can start a sports league, without having to go through the public schools, especially if the public schools want to keep the homeschoolers out, which is, a pox on that, if you ask me, especially when I pay entirely too much in taxes that support public education. Hey, Eli, can you please get Enoch down? Enoch, can you please get down? And Can you shut those cabinets? Anyway, public education, a little bit of a topic for another day. We're at an hour and 20 minutes almost here. Just to wrap up, free speech, the future of free speech is pretty bleak indeed. If we continue sending our kids into the public education system, which does not believe in or promote free speech, the public education system promotes conformity and submission to the progressive agenda and punishes speech which is conservative in a way not dissimilar to the way that ABC responds to Roseanne Barr and Joy Behar differently. And I think you all know I'm right. You know I'm right. Even the progressives, you know I'm right. And you probably even smile knowingly to yourself, saying that it's all for the greater good. But, Roseanne Barr, just like with Tim Allen, if she's got a good thing going there, hopefully some other outlet, some other broadcasting company picks her up. Not that I really want to watch a show, but I don't think somebody should be punished like that for saying something that's just because it's politically incorrect, while another person with far worse ratings says something that's fundamentally more disturbing and on live TV, and she still gets her show, and she's still on it, and an apology was all it took. I don't think that's right, and we're going to get only more of the same, more and more of the same, if we continue submitting ourselves to just lining up at the trough like everybody else. Our children are going to grow up to think increasingly, as generations go on, to become increasingly acclimated to that being the reality. That's just the way it is. We owe it to our children, we owe it to God to not settle for that. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time, and thank you for watching. God bless.